The first thing Olive thought was that in the past she had wanted to be transported into the world of her novel. She had always wished for that, but now she found herself in an unexpected situation. Before she can even understand what is happening around her, the bomb drops right into her lap, without warning and without any chance to defend herself. In front of her, 3 men and a boy watch her, and then the blonde prince with light-colored eyes points a finger at her and pronounces the sentence. From that moment on, Olive time is exiled from noble society. What a wonderful way to start her new life, isn't it? Looking back a little into the past, we see Olive in real life, a woman with long dark hair and lilac eyes. She has just returned home and exhausted, throws herself face down onto her bed, her shoes abandoned on the floor and her hair spread across the pillow, while thinking about how she almost missed the last train of the day. The exhaustion does the rest. She remembers that she joined a publishing company precisely because she was passionately in love with light novels. But in a twist of fate she ended up in the company's business division, and she has been following that routine for almost 10 years now. Deep down she likes her job, but the heavy workload leaves her feeling a little depressed whenever she stops to think about her own future. Girl, I totally get you. My biggest fear was adulthood, and honestly I was right to be afraid of it. And as if work-related worries were not enough, she thinks about how everyone around her is moving on with their lives, getting married, some already having children, while she has remained single for so long that she would rather not even bother counting. Still lying down, she lets her gaze fall to the floor beside the bed and notices the box she had brought back from her parents' house. Curiosity gets the better of her, so she opens it, and what she finds is a true treasure chest of memories, packed with manga and light novels that she devoured during her student days. As she flips through the materials, she recognizes a book she used as a reference when writing a novel about her favorite ship. A powerful wave of nostalgia hits her all at once. She remembers how carefree that time was, with no sales targets, no fear of the future, when the only important mission of the day was to fully embrace the life of an otaku. Among the memories, she comes across an old pink flip phone, still decorated with a little teddy bear keychain attached to it. She picks up the device and thinks that it is so old that the battery has probably been dead for ages. I just got flashbacks from seeing this phone. Ah, I miss school so much. However, she gets a surprise when she opens the phone and presses the power button. It is still working perfectly, with the screen lit up and the keys glowing. Once it turns on, she realizes that this is not just any phone she used to have when she was younger. This was the phone she used to write and publish her novel. On top of that, she gets another surprise. The device still contains the original copy of the story she created herself. A flood of memories returns when she sees her old novel and thinks about how she used to publish her story everywhere while dreaming of becoming a novelist. But now, rereading it through the eyes of an adult, she almost dies of embarrassment. The writing is rough, the world-building poorly developed, and the entire work she admits is simply terrible. The conclusion she reaches is harsh but honest. The whole novel looks like a collection of the most random fantasies of an otaku girl, all thrown together into one place. Even so, she cannot help but recognize how dedicated she was to that dream back then. And a sincere smile escapes her lips when she remembers the silent wish hidden behind every page, that one day a handsome man would finally come and save that lonely soul. I absolutely love seeing people who are passionate about stories. Our protagonist is honestly such a queen. Enchanted by this reunion with her past, she continues turning page after page until she finally reaches the end of the story. And right after the last page, a strange option appears on the screen. Continue writing. Without understanding where it came from, she ends up pressing the button almost automatically, without thinking much about the consequences. At that very instant, the phone begins to glow with an unnatural intensity, releasing a light that slips through her fingers, and she can barely process how all of this is happening simply because she touched the words "continue writing." A bright bluish light fills the entire room and completely envelopes her, while the phone seems to react on its own, without her needing to do anything else. When the light finally fades, she is no longer in her room. Suddenly the phone remains behind, abandoned on the floor beside the open box while her body is dragged to a completely different place. Collapsed on a red carpet, sore and frightened, she lets out a low groan and realizes that she is wearing an elegant dress with dark ruffles. Everything about the situation is confusing her. She begins looking around and notices that she is inside a huge, luxurious hall, surrounded by nobles dressed in formal attire. Confused and frightened, she asks what is happening and where she is. That is when a young man with blonde hair and blue eyes scolds her, asking why she is acting this way now of all times, and calls her by a name, Olive. After hearing the young man's words, she finally understands that in this world she is called Olive, but something still lingers in the back of her mind. Deep down, she feels as though she has seen that name somewhere before, and then it hits her. Olivie is the name of the villainess from the book she was reading, the story she herself wrote. I think it would be terrifying to reincarnate into a story I wrote, especially as the villainess. As she tries to absorb everything, another young man with silver hair continues provoking her. She asks the next young man, Lord Schiller, and says that he should stop making such a frightening face, or Olivie might end up getting scared. Lord Schiller, the young man with dark hair and a uniform adorned with golden epaulets, replies with disdain that Olivie is not some ordinary girl, so she would not be frightened simply because of the way he is speaking. Upon hearing that name, she experiences another important revelation. If she is not mistaken, Schiller is the name of the main hero of the story. In other words, she is surrounded by the central characters of her own novel, and worst of all, she is standing on the opposite side of the protagonists. Shortly afterward, the blonde prince approaches with a serious expression and asks whether she already knows what is about to happen. Still lost and beginning to feel afraid, she can only stammer, I, then the sentence is delivered, exactly as in the opening scene, I. The prince calls her by her full name, Olivie Time, and with his gloved finger pointed directly at her, declares that from this moment onward she is exiled from noble society. Realizing what is happening, recognizing a familiar name and a plot filled with the kind of cliché /U00E9s only a teenager would write, she comes to only one conclusion. She is the villainess in this story, and as she finally begins to understand everything she is going through, a thought emerges in her mind, did I really transmigrate into my own light novel? But she arrived in this world in the worst possible way. With a situation like this, calling her unlucky would be an understatement. Olivie is completely stunned, her hands half raised and her gaze unfocused as she tries to process the scale of the disaster she has found herself in. Amid the shock, reality finally sinks in. She really has reincarnated inside the romance novel she wrote during her teenage years. Trying to calm herself down, she begins to think things through like the practical adult she is. If this truly is the world of her novel, then all those handsome young men standing before her, lined up among the hall's columns, can only be the four most important members of the Noble Council, the organization whose word is final within the Academy. The first to speak is the president of the Noble Council, Schiller Schefflera, the young man with blonde hair and light blue eyes, dressed entirely in white and gold. With a serious expression, he does absolutely nothing to ease Olivie's terror. He tells her that she has undoubtedly understood the situation already, and that being expelled from the Noble Council automatically means being expelled from the Academy as well. Next speaks the council's treasurer, Noir Blanca, a young man with silver hair, yellow eyes, a blue gemstone earring, and a uniform decorated with golden epaulets. With his eyes lowered, speaking in a more regretful tone and wearing an expression of disappointment, he says that unfortunately there is no longer any place for her there. He addresses her as Miss Olivie, as though they were complete strangers. Then comes the council's secretary, or a trainee, a young man with dark hair, glasses, and blue eyes. Speaking politely, in complete contrast to the previous two, and adjusting his glasses with a gloved hand, he offers to help her pack her belongings if she needs assistance. Finally, we are introduced to the last member of the quartet, the vice president of the council, Aster Sankwell, a young man with messy reddish-brown hair and red eyes. With a teasing tone and a half-smile on his face, he jabs at his colleagues and asks whether they are not being a little too kind to her. Finally, we learn Olivie's role, or rather, her former role. She was the council scribe. I have to admit, I'm curious about what she did, because for everyone to turn against her this openly, it must have been something pretty serious. Observing all of them, the protagonist pieces everything together and confirms her worst suspicion. She really has transmigrated into the body of Olivie, the great villainess of the story she wrote as a teenager. While she is still processing all of that, a new figure joins the conversation between her and the four young men. And that figure is none other than the heroine of the novel, Lonaria Forklock, a young woman with wavy brown hair and golden eyes wearing a large pink ribbon on her uniform. She approaches them with a worried expression and asks everyone to show mercy to Miss Olivie, suggesting that they stop what they are doing. Seeing the scene, Olivie connects the dots. She was part of the Noble Council and is being expelled for bullying Lonaria. So the original Olivie was a thorn in everyone's side? Well, who would have thought? A villainess acting like a villainess. What a scandal. As the heroine's intervention only makes it even more obvious how adored Lonaria is by everyone present, Schiller comments on how kind and gentle she is, especially considering that she is willing to defend someone as cruel as Olivie. And Lonaria herself reinforces her saintly image by putting herself down. She says that she is nothing compared to Lord Schiller and that, despite having no talent whatsoever, she still insists on helping others, all while her eyes glisten with unshed tears. Her words accompanied by her restrained crying catch Schiller off guard, and he ends up stammering her name. Internally, Olive watches the interaction and already knows the storyline by heart. A heroine with no real abilities, constantly victimized by bullying, appears in the story. And for some reason, the president of the Noble Council seems to have more than enough reasons to adore her. Rereading her own plot through the eyes of an adult, she admits without mercy that the story she wrote is simply far too cheesy. Yeah, when we're younger, it's tough to create something truly good. Everyone has gone through that embarrassing wall of text phase. And as every good cliché demands, the president is not the only one to react to the heroine's words. John Quell, the vice president, complete with a musical note practically floating out of his speech bubble because of how sarcastic he is, tells Schiller and Lanaria that the two of them are putting on quite a performance with this little scene. Schiller is startled by the jab. Noir Blanca, the treasurer, joins in as well and, staring directly at the president, says that it would hardly be fair for him to be the only one allowed to get so close to the defenseless young lady. Schiller's shock only grows and he finds himself unable to say anything else. Oratrinia, the secretary, remains silent, nearly observing everyone through his glasses with a thoughtful expression. Olive watches all of this and remembers, in her story all 4 members of the council are obsessed with Lanaria. I absolutely love that she planted all these clichés with her own hands and is now sitting here judging every single one of them. It's the most entertaining kind of hypocrisy to watch. As she watches the president stumble over his own explanations to his colleagues, a single thought takes over her mind. And that thought points directly to the problem. She knows exactly how this story ends. If nothing changes, all of you will be banished to a remote and isolated region and will eventually die completely alone, abandoned in a forgotten corner of the world. And she concludes that being killed by the terrible plot she herself wrote would be far too tragic. That is when she decides to go against the story unfolding before her. She stands up, revealing her full uniform, a navy blue jacket over a purple skirt, a pink ribbon tied around her neck and heeled boots, and approaches the group in the middle of their heated discussion, determined to get Lanaria's attention. As soon as Schiller notices all of the approaching, he takes the opportunity to change the direction of the conversation. He turns toward her and immediately becomes aggressive. Pointing a finger directly at her face, he shouts, asking whether she has nothing to say about the entire situation. But Olive remains unfazed. With the greatest calm in the world, she steps forward and looks Schiller directly in the eyes without backing down even a single step, standing face to face with him. Then she says that yes, she does have something to say and throws the question back at him. What is the real reason they want to expel her from the council? Outraged, Schiller replies that she knows perfectly well. It has already been explained before. She is being expelled because she is guilty of bullying Lanaria. She immediately fires back and demands proof that she actually intimidated Miss Lanaria. Schiller responds that there are numerous testimonies regarding the matter without giving an inch and now pointing her finger right back at him. She fires back, then let them show proof that those testimonies are not pure fabrication. Well. The Queen clearly binge-watched courtroom dramas to come up with a comeback like that. Welcome to Law and Order Ice Sky. Schiller is left speechless by such a well-reasoned challenge and finds himself completely unable to respond, visibly shaken. Deep down, Olavi knows she has to bet everything on this move. Even though she acted on impulse, she is gambling that no unexpected twist will appear. After all, her reasoning is sound. Since that novel was created by an otaku teenager deep in her Chinibu phase, there is little chance that detailed logic or concrete evidence exists behind those accusations. She highly doubts that her middle school self went through the trouble of inventing actual proof. Taking advantage of Schiller's shock, Olavi does not let up and continues her assault. She says that she already understands that the decision to expel her came solely from him, and then she pulls a loophole from the council's rules. There is a fundamental rule, she explains: decisions regarding members of the Noble Council, including expulsions, must be decided through a vote, not through the unilateral whim of a single person. And look at her quoting the regulations from memory. Then again, she wrote this story herself, so she can invent whatever rule she wants and get away with it. She concludes her argument by saying that Schiller should know that very well, and that the final word is not his alone. Therefore, if he is so determined to see her removed, he should call for an official vote. Everyone present turns towards Schiller, waiting for an answer. Noir approaches the president and asks what his decision will be. Orit agrees that the argument is reasonable, and with a hand on his chin, helps tighten the pressure on Schiller even further. Schiller considers the matter for a moment and admits that Olavi's logic is sound. Even so, he makes sure to warn her that, vote or no vote, the final result will not change. Then he makes the decision official, raising 3 fingers. In 3 months, an expulsion election will be held. Olavi will compete against Lunaria, and whoever wins will become an official member of the Noble Council. In the end, she really did manage to sway the council and secure her trial. Internally, Olavi celebrates quietly. That means 3 extra months to stay alive and figure out a way to fix the situation. She then bows to Schiller and thanks him. Afterward, she turns toward Lunaria, extends her hand, and proposes a fair competition. Lunaria is surprised by the gesture but ultimately accepts, and the two seal the agreement with a handshake. Outwardly, Lunaria appears friendly and accepts the entire situation without complaint, wearing a sweet smile with her eyes closed. But inwardly, her thoughts reveal the true face hidden behind the mask. Her expression suddenly darkens, and she grumbles to herself that the entire thing is nothing more than a massive nuisance. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The saintly heroine is not quite as saintly as she seems. Is she? Now things are finally getting interesting. As Olavi and Lunaria shake hands and agree to the election, the 4 council members watch the 2 young women in silence. However, Lunaria suddenly says that all of this was completely unnecessary and slaps Olavi's hand away. Schiller is the first to step forward and approach the heroine. He takes hold of her shoulders, and Lunaria immediately nestles herself into his arms. Lunaria's change of masks is instantaneous, and she quickly insists that she is fine. Watching the scene in shock, Olavi looks at the young woman with a certain degree of disdain while wondering how someone could have such an awful personality. She even questions whether she really wrote Lunaria that way. Schiller watches Olavi with a threatening gaze while trying to comfort Lunaria. He then apologizes to Lunaria for the inconvenience and reassures her with a promise. If she wins the election, she will officially be allowed to stay by his side. Sweetly, with her eyes closed, Lunaria gives him her most affectionate expression and says that she understands everything. Look at her switching expressions faster than I switch browser tabs when my boss walks up behind my desk. She should be teaching classes. Watching the scene from a distance, Olavi thinks that at least she managed to escape the fate of immediate expulsion, at least for now, and now her plan is to learn how things work in this world so that she has a chance of winning the election. Seeing that there is nothing left worth watching besides 2 lovebirds acting enamored with each other, Olavi announces that she is leaving to prepare for the election. Schiller does not miss the opportunity to take another jab at his rival. He tells Olavi that she should start packing her belongings already because she is definitely going to lose the election. Without losing her composure, Olavi fires back in the same manner, saying that she will do that after seeing the election results. She turns her back on them and bids farewell with complete confidence. This woman takes an insult and returns it with interest and inflation adjustment. Outside the academy, Olavi wanders through the courtyards, lost in her thoughts. Accompanied by the stares of others, she feels as though the pressure of this election is far greater than any presentation she ever had to give in her previous world, but another thought allows Olavi to drift away. Despite all the danger, she is still surrounded by incredibly handsome young men. In a somewhat dreamy mood, she thinks that perhaps it would actually be fun to be the heroine of the story instead of Lunaria. Let's be fair, if I were the one facing exile but the committee responsible for my fate consisted entirely of men at that level, my imagination would wander a little too. It's only human. However, the fantasy quickly fades. For a single office worker in her 30s like herself, perhaps the role of a villainess on the verge of ruin suits her even better than that of a heroine, but she accepts it with a smile. Finally snapping out of her daydreams and accepting that she may actually be in the role that fits her life best, Olavi realizes that she has no idea what to do next. When panic takes over her body, she has absolutely no idea where Olavi lives. She realizes that she has no clue where she is supposed to go, nor how the daily life of the body she has inherited actually works. While Olavi struggles through her address-related crisis, a meeting is taking place inside the council chamber. All 4 council members, together with Lunaria, are discussing how Olavi managed to completely turn the tables in a way none of them expected. Noir, the treasurer, throws out a jab, saying that Schiller could have simply expelled her on the spot. Everyone in the room looks at the treasurer with serious expressions but says nothing. In the end, it is Schiller who breaks the silence. He says that for an organization responsible for maintaining order within the academy, the council cannot simply break its own rules whenever it feels like it. Noir counters by admitting that he is intrigued, because Olavi seems to have become a completely different person from the moment she learned she was going to be expelled. Schiller agrees and says that he never expected the young woman to confront him in that manner. He adds that he hopes this change in attitude does not make Olavi too unpredictable. He finishes by saying that they should not be worried about Olavi herself, but rather about what might happen to Lunaria if Olavi decides to act from the shadows. Lunaria begins to blush when she sees how concerned Schiller is for her. Orit, the secretary, agrees with Schiller and says that he is right to be concerned. His tone becomes threatening as he says that if Olavi tries to do anything to Lunaria, they will have to take measures. The sentence hangs in the air unfinished, but everyone understands exactly what he means. The one who completes the thought is Astor, the vice president. He offers to keep an eye on Olavi for the time being. Schiller asks whether he is truly capable of handling the task. Without hesitation, Astor responds that of course he is. After all, he is Lord Schiller's loyal right-hand man. Translated into plain language, Olavi has just been assigned a personal bodyguard she never asked for. Schiller looks at his second-in-command while thinking that if Astor can truly keep watch over Olavi, it will be the best way to prevent her from doing anything reckless. With the matter discussed and settled, and with Astor watching her, Olavi will not dare attempt anything foolish. That means Lunaria will be able to focus entirely on preparing for the election without any worries. Schiller further explains that, because of his position, he cannot become directly involved. However, at the very least, he can provide all the people and resources she might need. He offers his support, saying that if Lunaria needs anything at all, she only has to ask. Lunaria thanks him and returns to her sweet, carefully crafted smile. Although she appears surprised on the outside, inwardly she feels completely indifferent. Beneath all the politeness, it becomes clear that the entire machinery of the council is already turning in the heroine's favor. Finally, she says that everything is fine and that if she ever needs him, she will let him know without thinking twice, all while giving one of her sincere smiles. Outside the room where the meeting is taking place, leaning discreetly against the door and eavesdropping on everything happening on the other side, a young woman with green hair is carefully noting down every word she hears. With a smile on her face, she thinks to herself that things are becoming more and more interesting as time goes on, and it seems we have our first gossip-loving character in the story. Will she end up helping Olavi at some point? We are in the bedroom of an ordinary young aristocrat, surrounded by packed bookshelves, a study desk, and even more books scattered across every piece of furniture. In the middle of it all, Olivia is sprawled across the bed with her arms open, finally able to relax after a completely insane day. Deep down, she thinks about how lucky she was to find a butler who guided her to her room. Without him, she would probably still be wandering through the academy's endless hallways and, considering her newly established luck, she would most likely have stumbled into an even worse bad ending than the one already waiting for her. Still dwelling on everything she experienced over the past few hours, she wonders whether she is truly going through one of those reincarnation scenarios she has read about in countless novels, or if this is nothing more than an extremely vivid dream. Still lying down, she reaches for one of the books resting on the bed and picks it up while thinking that everything in this place feels far too real to be just a dream. And it is precisely that realism that opens a crack of panic amid her exhaustion. If this is not a dream, then what happened to her on the other side, in the life she left behind? Olivia furrows her brow as she tries to understand what brought her into this world. The first thing that comes to mind is that she must have been hit by a truck. But no, that definitely did not happen. Then a second possibility appears, perhaps she simply worked herself to death. That second option could actually be true, considering that over the last few months she had been working like a madwoman at her job. Even so, Olivia cannot bring herself to accept that idea, and the question that refuses to go away remains there: if she really died, what happens to her now? Tired of going around in circles on this carousel of unanswered questions, she ends up clinging to the most convenient explanation. This had to be a dream. After all, it was impossible for someone to be thrown inside a manga. Her attention only shifts when she realizes that the book in her hands is actually a mystery novel. Finally, something she understands in this new world. And I thought it was cute that it happened to be a story similar to the novels from her own world. The sparkle in her eyes changes instantly as she begins reading the book and her interest awakens. After reading the first few pages, she realizes that it has been ages since she last picked up one of her favorite kinds of books. Her work consumed so much of her time that she practically spent the entire year doing nothing but working. Savoring this rare opportunity to do something she truly loves, Olivia dives headfirst into the story and immediately begins commenting on it. A handsome yet somewhat clumsy detective paired with an incredibly competent assistant who carries the entire team? That was practically the dream combination every otaku girl would want to read about. Living in the middle of her bed, she finally has a positive thought about this world. If she can avoid that tragic ending, perhaps surviving here for a while would not be so bad after all. With a smile on her face, she ultimately concludes that living in this world would be far too crazy, so imagining a future there is nothing more than a little game she is playing to fool herself. The next day finally dawns over the Great Halsey Academy. The rays of sunlight stream through the window of Olivia's room, and of course she fell asleep while reading her book. Now she is finally waking up from her beauty sleep, noticing that she has awakened in the exact same place as the day before. She still finds the entire situation hard to believe. However, she does not have much time to dwell on it when a voice calls to her from outside the room and says that it is time for her to get ready. Surprised, Olivia replies that everything is fine and that she is on her way to open the door. With the help of a maid, she gets dressed and prepares herself for another day in this strange world. Even so, she thinks that she still does not really understand how this world works. For now though, all she needs to do is be very careful to play the role of Olivia convincingly. She finishes closing her bag, takes a deep breath, and thinks that if she loses the election there will be no escape from the fate awaiting her. Poor people's happiness really doesn't last long, does it? She had one peaceful night and already woke up drowning in problems. Honestly, that's exactly what my daily life feels like. Finally leaving her dormitory, Olivia travels by carriage to the entrance of the academic building. She steps down, takes a deep breath, and stares at the academy's facade, wondering what path she should take from this point forward. Olivia is pulled from her thoughts by a young man wearing a beret who shouts, "Extra! Extra! Breaking news!" while handing out newspapers to the students at the entrance. She watches several students approach the young man, grabbing newspapers to catch up on the latest news. Amid all the commotion, she picks up one of the newspapers that had fallen to the ground while the newsboy was shouting. Opening it, she reads, "The Great Halsey Academy Gazette, Special Edition, Election and Dismissal of the Leadership." As she continues reading, Olivia thinks that it looks far more like a gossip tabloid than a serious newspaper. Then it finally clicks. The incident from the previous day involving her and the council has become headline news for that bunch of gossip addicts disguised as journalists. Olivia continues walking through the courtyard with the newspaper in hand, until a commotion ahead of her makes her stop. She notices a group of students gathered around Lanaria, who is trying to convince them to vote for her. And of course, the attempt works perfectly. She is immediately embraced and showered with support from everyone around her. Words of encouragement rain down upon her. Some say that only she deserves to stand beside the council president. Others insist that she absolutely has to defeat Olivia since the latter is viewed as a genuine witch. Lanaria realizes that her plan is working flawlessly and smiles inwardly with satisfaction, all while maintaining her angelic facade and tearfully thanking everyone for their support. I swear Lanaria is so irritating. I absolutely hate fake and manipulative characters like her. Olivia watches the scene and begins reflecting on the social disaster the original Olivia managed to create before she inherited this body. She thinks that it makes perfect sense for Lanaria, the protagonist of this cliché-filled story, to be loved and supported by everyone. And when she compares herself to the heroine, she realizes the harsh truth. Olivia is the one who is judged and even hated by practically the entire academy. Trying not to become depressed, Olivia redirects her attention to the newspaper and wonders how they managed to publish the story so quickly after an event that happened only the day before. Peeking at the fine print, she discovers that the newspaper is produced by the Publications Club. Her curiosity immediately grows, since it sounds remarkably similar to the job she had in her previous world. Excited by the possibility of finally finding a place that might help her figure out how to win the election, she fails to notice someone standing directly in front of her. Olivia walks straight into him and nearly falls, but she is caught just in time. The young man firmly wraps an arm around her waist and steadies her. The person who saves her is Aster, who tells her that she should be more careful and that a noble lady like her should not be reading while walking. With her cheeks turning red, Olivia has no idea how to react to Aster, who only a few hours ago had been treating her with disdain during the council meeting. Staring at the handsome young man, all she manages to say is a stammered, "Sorry." Aster watches her with a smile while looking at the embarrassed Olivia, who is still wondering what exactly he wants from her. Taking the initiative and catching Olivia completely off guard, he reveals that he is there to offer assistance with her election campaign. More confused than ever, Olivia is left speechless, still trying to process everything that has been thrown at her in such a short amount of time. All she can manage is a confused, "Hun," as she struggles to understand what is happening. Aster looks at the bewildered Olivia and repeats that he is there to help her with her election campaign. And that is when reality truly sinks in for Olivia. One of the protagonists of her story, the very person who was always supposed to be the villainous enemy, is now offering to fight alongside her. She stares at Aster's confident expression without being able to respond immediately, and all that escapes her lips is another stunned, "Huh?" The idea still refuses to settle in her mind. How is it possible that Aster Sankwell is suddenly offering his help so willingly? Unable to process it on her own, she decides to be direct, and asks him what exactly he means by help. The answer comes in the form of a crooked smile and another question. Why, all of a sudden, is she calling him Lord Aster? He steps closer, lowers his voice, and comments that he already had his suspicions, but honestly, she has been acting differently ever since the previous day. And now we have another classic Ice Guy cliché. The protagonist knows absolutely nothing about the past of the person whose body she possesses. I absolutely love this trap every time it appears. Olivia swallows hard, because this is exactly the kind of situation she fears the most. The original Olivia's past opening up a massive abyss right beneath her feet. Two thoughts explode in her mind at the same time. The first is logical and desperate. Has he already figured me out? The second is completely untimely and even louder. His face is way too close, and his face really is far too close, close enough to genuinely affect Olivia. The blood rushes all the way to her ears, and for a brief moment, panic takes over completely, complete with spirals in her eyes and a face burning red. Pulling herself together, Olivia pretends nothing happened and simply apologizes before asking what exactly he wants from her. Aster ignores her moment of confusion as if it were the most natural thing in the world and repeats that he came to help with her campaign, proposing that they work together to secure her victory. Still suspicious, Olivia does not accept the offer so easily and asks Aster whether he is really comfortable betraying Schiller. Her mind runs through everything she knows about him. As far as she remembers, Aster is supposed to be the highly competent subordinate, the absolutely trusted right-hand man of the council president, and that is precisely why nothing in that mental profile explains why he would suddenly appear, swearing loyalty to his boss's number one enemy. With a faint smile on his face, Aster keeps his true intentions hidden and simply replies, "Who knows?" Then he adds that he merely thought it would be more entertaining if he were on her side. The two stand facing each other in the corridor while Olivia processes the statement in silence. Her internal verdict is immediate and cautious. The word suspicious flashes through her mind like a giant red flag. Even so, Olivia thinks back to all the stares and judgment she has received, as well as all the love and attention Lenaria has been given by those same people, and she realizes that there is no way she can turn this situation around on her own. Trying to do so would be practically impossible. The realization lands heavily on her shoulders. On the other hand, accepting the vice president's help would dramatically increase her chances. After all, she would be relying on one of the most influential figures in the entire academy. The conclusion comes together quickly in her mind, and even if he eventually reveals himself to be an enemy, she can simply cut ties with him after making use of his assistance. That is a very big if, but I don't think she's exactly in a position to be picky right now. Having made up her mind, Olivia lifts her head and says that extra hands are always welcome and that she is happy to accept his help. Aster smiles at her answer and immediately moves on to what truly matters. He asks what her plan is for the election, with absolutely no answer prepared, because let's be honest, she had not thought of anything. Olivia mumbles that she is still working on it while trying to look thoughtful. Before Aster can respond, the sound of bells ringing across the courtyard reaches them, signaling that classes are about to begin. Realizing that time has passed much faster than she expected, Olivia comments, somewhat anxiously, that they have failed to come up with absolutely anything. Then she dashes off, leaving Aster behind while shouting that they should schedule a strategy meeting after classes to figure out what to do. Aster watches her run off until she disappears from sight, and lost in thought reaches a conclusion. Alone, he comments on how Olivia has truly changed, leaving him with lingering doubts about his fellow council member. I don't know about you, but to me we've already found our resident heartthrob and I'm absolutely convinced he's going to turn into a top-tier golden retriever boyfriend for our protagonist. Afternoon falls over the Great Halsey Academy, and as agreed, Olivia and Aster meet for their first strategy session to prepare for the election. Settled in a more secluded room, Aster apologizes, explaining that it was the only available location. He explains that after the previous day's incident at the council meeting, it was decided that this would be the only room Olivia would be allowed to use. Olivia listens to the explanation without being bothered by it, and simply lets him continue speaking. Aster then asks what her plan is for winning votes. In an almost uncertain tone, Olivia begins by saying that there are many things that need to be done, but in her opinion the foundation of everything is establishing first contact with the other students, and the first step would be walking around the academy and greeting everyone. Aster furrows his brow, not immediately understanding where she is going with this, and repeats the idea of walking around greeting people, asking whether that is supposed to be some kind of campaign strategy. Now finally confident, Olivia says that it is exactly what she has in mind while searching through her bag. Then she pulls out her greatest weapon for launching her election campaign, a business card she made herself. The card is nothing short of alien to that world, featuring an adorable chibi version of Olivia herself. At the top is an invitation to get in touch if anyone ever needs help, and at the bottom, written in large letters, is the name Olivia Time. Aster stares at the card with the expression of someone who cannot decide whether to laugh or be concerned, and asks what exactly it is. Completely unfazed and puffing out her chest with pride, Olivia explains that it is a business card, that she intends to give this election everything she has, and asks him to help distribute the cards to the other students. Her little card is so cute, and she's even cuter getting all excited while showing it to him. Aster's reaction does not take long. He holds back his laughter for exactly half a second before collapsing into a fit of laughter. Olivia immediately feels her face catch fire and jumps onto the defensive, demanding to know what is so funny. Still laughing, he replies that the idea is actually a very good one, a pretty interesting idea in fact. Olivia immediately lights up at the unexpected praise, but her happiness does not last long. Aster continues with all the delicacy of someone delivering bad news and bluntly states that the drawing is terrible. "Shut up!" bursts out loud and clear as Olivia turns red all the way to the roots of her hair. Aster's jab ends up triggering a memory from her previous life. Back at the publishing company, she always struggled whenever she had to create promotional materials or advertisement artwork. She was simply terrible at it. A memory from her old job passes through her mind like a thorn, herself staring at a blank sheet of paper with the expression of someone utterly defeated. In the end, her terrible artistic skills followed her into this new world and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. "Girl, I totally understand. My artistic talents are limited to drawing stick figures and even that's questionable." Aster watches her despair with a patient smile and comments that this sort of thing is best left to people who actually know what they're doing. For a moment, her editorial brain starts turning. People who know what they're doing. Someone specialized in layout design, illustration, publishing. The connection is almost audible, but before she can finish the thought, Aster turns his head toward a specific corner of the room and calmly addresses what appears to be empty space, saying that he knows someone is there. Aster and Olivia both look toward the indicated spot and a figure finally emerges into the room. The first thing the newcomer says falls over the room with almost playful calm, "So I was discovered after all?" The appearance of this unexpected person leaves Olivia completely frozen as she tries to understand where exactly the intruder came from. The figure slowly steps out from behind the wall, no longer making any effort to hide. The statement hangs in the room with an almost amused calmness. Olivia stares at the figure with the expression of someone who has just been startled. As she recognizes the face, she stammers, connecting the dots a little too late, wondering if that is not Secretary Orit. Aster immediately takes care of the introductions. Leaning casually against the desk as always, he explains that Orit is the eldest son of their branch family. Then, with a rare hint of affection, he adds that Orit is also his childhood friend. Orit completes his own introduction with the formality of someone reciting a job title, stating that officially his duty is to serve as Lord Aster's personal advisor. Orit then approaches Olivia and studies her with an analytical gaze without saying a single word. Uncomfortable under his scrutiny, Olivia cannot help thinking that he genuinely seems to dislike her. Poor Olivia really cannot catch a break with these council members, can she? Every 5 minutes one of them comes up with a new way to criticize her. Not wasting any time, Aster takes advantage of Orit's arrival and asks his loyal companion for help. Aster asks his friend whether he is really as good at drawing as people say. Holding Olivia's card in his hands, he requests help fixing the disaster she created. Olivia feels as though an arrow has pierced her heart at the sheer fatherly confidence with which Aster calls her drawing a disaster in front of someone else. Orit examines the card with an incredulous look while Aster eagerly waits for his evaluation. He turns toward Olivia and says that the drawing really is bad, then asks whether she actually made it herself. Completely on the defensive, Olivia yells at both of them to shut up and insists that everyone has weaknesses in certain areas. Seeing the way the young woman reacts and the fact that her face has turned completely red from embarrassment, the two young men simply laugh at her excessively defensive reaction. Aster does not let it slide, nudging her with that teasing smile as he says that even weaknesses have their limits. Orit, on the other hand, abandons the teasing and focuses on his friend's request, saying that since Aster is asking for his help, he will most certainly help the two of them. Olivia becomes incredibly excited by his words and still, unable to believe it, asks whether he would really do that for her. Aster watches the interaction between the two with a displeased expression. Orit notices and briefly changes his attitude toward Olivia, saying with a sigh that he will help her. I don't know about this, I think Aster has always liked her and this election assistance is just an excuse to score a few points with his crush. The afternoon passes as the newly formed trio works together to salvage at least Olivia's business cards. The table is a complete mess. Freshly cut pieces of paper, crayons, paintbrushes, and scissors are just some of the tools involved in creating a new presentation card that is actually acceptable. After a long period of focused work, Olivia stands up and offers everyone a break while she prepares some tea. With a smile on his face, Aster thanks her for the gesture while Orit watches him with a suspicious expression. The two are left alone in the room while Olivia goes to prepare tea for everyone. Orit takes advantage of the opportunity to finally question Aster about his intentions toward Olivia. He directly asks why Aster suddenly decided to support her, especially when she is a student with such a terrible reputation throughout the academy that she is practically a walking problem. Aster listens and thinks about it for a moment. Then he asks his friend whether the idea that she is such a terrible person might simply be the result of rumors spread by other students. Orit replies that for rumors to exist, there must be at least one or two truths hidden among them. Aster agrees while bending down to retrieve something that appears to be underneath the table. Then he pulls out the phone that brought Olivia into this world. Okay, now I'm genuinely shocked by this plot twist. How did the phone end up in this world? And even worse, one of her enemies is the one who found it. Orit stares at the object in his friend's hand and asks what is wrong with it. With a mischievous smile, Aster says that nothing is wrong. He simply found something very interesting to read. By late afternoon, the center of the academy is as crowded as expected for the time when students are leaving their classes. Olivia gathers her courage and dives into the busy courtyard, handing out her materials with the best professional smile she can manage while introducing herself as Olivia Time. However, her attempt to win over the other students does not seem particularly effective. Many of them look at her with distrust and fear. She ignores those looks and says that she wants to continue working hard for the Noble Council and asks for their support and votes. The suspicious looks continue. However, a pair of hands finally reaches out and takes one of the cards Olivia has been offering to everyone. Thrilled that someone has finally accepted one of her cards, Olivia immediately begins thanking the young man. Unfortunately, his expression is anything but supportive. With a mocking tone, he asks what exactly she hoped to gain by going this far. Then he tears the card in half and throws it onto the ground before turning his back on a stunned Olivia who has no idea how to react to what just happened. Wow, what a jerk. I absolutely hate that kind of behavior. At that moment, a familiar voice comments that he expected something like that to happen eventually. With her voice trembling slightly, Olivia greets Aster with a sad expression. Aster crouches down and picks up the torn card, saying that he cannot understand why people act so aggressively toward her. Olivia falls silent for a moment. Then she answers Aster that according to the Academy newspaper, she is a hated person because of the terrible reputation she has among the students. She goes on to talk about her current situation and everything that happened before and during the election. Convincing the council to hold the election was merely a gamble to buy herself more time to search for evidence proving whether she really bullied Lanaria. However, so far there is no concrete evidence that any of it actually happened. Therefore, all these opinions about who Olivia is are nothing more than speculation. She then explains that everything she did today with the business cards and the campaign effort was simply the best way she could think of to show the Academy community who she truly is. Aster is momentarily stunned by Olivia's honesty and finds himself at a loss for words. Who would have thought that sincerity could be so shocking, right, Aster? Olivia notices that she has left the young man speechless and asks what is wrong since he was the one who brought up the topic in the first place. Trying to stay optimistic, Aster says that they need to remain positive and not give up despite these setbacks. She then hands Olivia a small pouch filled with sweets that he brought so she would not go hungry during her campaign. After that, he says goodbye without adding anything else. Surprised by this development, Olivia reflects on how shy she still is for someone her age. She thinks that if she were younger, she might have been more honest about her own feelings. While Olivia is caught off guard by all these twists and turns happening in such a short period of time, someone is watching her through a window. Schiller and Lanaria observe Olivia in the courtyard while commenting on how pathetic the whole scene was to watch. Lanaria remarks that now all she needs to do is give it her best effort and that there is no way she can afford even the slightest chance of losing to Olivia. Schiller listens to her and can only apologize for allowing the situation to reach this point because of Olivia's audacity. Lanaria tells him that everything is fine and that there is no need for him to apologize. Despite the optimism she displays outwardly, Lanaria harbors very different thoughts about the situation involving Olivia. All she can think about is how, with every passing moment, this election is becoming more and more of a nightmare for her. Lanaria also thinks that none of this would be happening if it were not for Olivia's interference with her plans. Honestly, I hope Lanaria gets what she deserves by the end of the story. I absolutely hate how manipulative she is. While Lanaria boils with resentment behind her carefully crafted mask, placing the blame for all her nightmares on a single person, Olivia remains completely unaware of the hatred directed at her and continues doing the most political thing possible, trying to connect with people. Olivia takes a deep breath, puts on her best smile, and dives back into the crowded courtyard greeting people and introducing herself. The problem, however, is that enthusiasm alone does not win votes. She tries her hardest to be as friendly as possible, but that alone is not enough. After having countless smiles met with coldness or worse by people who do not even bother looking at her, Olivia is forced to admit that the day's results have been deeply disappointing. She had imagined that handing out cards would at least create opportunities to start conversations, but most people barely even glanced at her. I feel so bad for her. She's trying so hard and getting absolutely nothing in return. There is no way everyone in this academy hates her that much. While Olivia struggles with rejection, her rival experiences the exact opposite. On the other side of the courtyard, Schiller and Lanaria walk side by side as though they have been married for years and no longer feel any need to hide their relationship. Their presence sparks countless delighted comments among the students. People remark on how close Lord Schiller and Miss Lanaria seem these days. The chorus of admiration continues enthusiastically, repeating exactly what Olivia least wants to hear. Many of the students in the courtyard believe that if the couple led the noble council together, everything would be perfect and that it would simply be the natural outcome. The image of the perfect golden couple, beloved by everyone, stands in comical contrast to the villainess standing alone with a stack of business cards in her hands while receiving suspicious looks. Olivia sighs. She knew this would not be easy, but so far absolutely nothing has gone in her favor. Poor Olivia is moving at the speed of a bicycle while that schemer Lanaria is soaring like a rocket. This election is ridiculously unfair. As she feels even more discouraged by the reality unfolding before her eyes, Olivia hears a voice asking whether she should not simply give up already. She is startled by the voice. Aster appears with his arms crossed and his usual smile, tossing out the question as casually as someone poking at a hornet's nest just to see what happens. Give up. That is not an option for Olivia. She explains that doing so would lead directly to her exile. Aster listens and then proposes something that could potentially help her gain the votes she needs to win. He suggests that Olivia use her family's wealth, flaunt her authority, or even intimidate others into supporting her. After all, she is the daughter of a marquis and obtaining what she needs should be incredibly easy. Olivia listens to every one of those suggestions, but she knows better than anyone that following that path would also lead straight to exile. She shakes her head and says that even if that approach works temporarily, she knows very well that it would come back to haunt her in the future. She adds that it is the same with elections, work, and life in general. Shortcuts bring major consequences. Well said, Olivia. The easy path usually only comes back to make your life harder later on. Aster watches her for a moment, clearly caught off guard and surprised by what she said, and then asks whether that is truly what she believes deep down. Olivia nods in confirmation and says that this election is the kind of thing that requires time and effort with no shortcuts if she wants to avoid problems later. In his usual teasing tone, Aster says that she sounds like a teacher and wonders whether she is really 17 years old. For half a second, Olivia feels the ground disappear beneath her feet. Because of course, she has not been 17 for a very long time. Beneath that high school girl's body is an adult woman with years of experience in the corporate world, and he has just touched on exactly that subject, making her even more anxious that her secret might be discovered. And apparently her Don Juan is not just handsome, he only pretends to be clueless. I can't wait until she finds out that he has her phone. In controlled panic, desperately trying not to show her shock, Olivia replies that yes, she is a genuine 17-year-old maiden. Aster watches her almost robotic response and smiles as though he has finally understood something about Olivia. However, Aster gives no indication that he has discovered the truth about who she really is. Instead, he simply bursts out laughing. Rather than doubting her, he finds the situation amusing and the laughter catches her completely off guard, leaving her stunned and unsure how to react. Inside, however, alarm bells are ringing. She recognizes how dangerous that moment was. She let her guard down around Aster and her true self almost slipped out. She watches him from the corner of her eye, wondering about his real intentions. And the same unanswered question returns with force: is he really on her side? Before she can reach a conclusion, however, Aster suggests that they start thinking about the next step of their plan. Olivia agrees, and before she can even begin formulating a strategy, Aster's attention shifts toward Orit. He calls the secretary over to join them. As punctual as ever, Orit appears from behind a wall and asks whether someone called for him. Olivia jumps slightly. That man has a gift for hiding in plain sight and never being noticed. Watching the two young men talk among themselves, she realizes that she is going to have to get used to the secretary's constant yet discreet presence, since he is always attached to Aster's side. Aster asks Orit whether he has any good ideas for improving Olivia's terrible social standing. Orit thinks for a moment and comes up with a suggestion. The day progresses at the academy and we see a poster featuring Olivia that declares she is searching for the perfect office worker and that she will do anything necessary to achieve her goal. Then we see Olivia herself holding a broom and sweeping the courtyard with a simple and cheerful expression on her face. Watching from a distance are Aster and Orit. Aster asks his secretary whether it is really appropriate for a marquise's daughter to be doing that kind of work. Orit replies that the position Olivia is competing for on the council is, at its core, that of general affairs scribe, the person who solves problems, organizes things, and handles all the behind-the-scenes work that nobody else wants to do. So instead of trying to appear noble and powerful, why not show exactly that side of herself? Why not prove through her actions that she is willing to do anything? And so the entire academy is treated to an unlikely sight: the daughter of a marquise, wearing an apron over her uniform, sweeping the courtyard with a broom in her hands. Olivia overhears their conversation and says that she actually enjoys sweeping the courtyard and that this is not merely an attempt to improve her public image. Would you look at that? She really threw herself wholeheartedly into the cleaning job. I have to admit that surprised me. With mild concern, she comments that if only someone would ask her to help with a random task, it would be great for improving her image. And for once, the universe decides to be generous to Olivia in a way it has not been lately. A woman approaches Olivia and asks whether she is available to help with anything. Olivia practically jumps to attention and immediately confirms that she is. Relieved, the woman explains her request. She needs help organizing the library, since the person normally responsible for that task is currently on leave. Aster and Orit are both surprised by how quickly things begin unfolding after Olivia's announcement. Meanwhile, Olivia's violet eyes sparkle, standing in stark contrast to the stunned expressions on Aster's and Orit's faces. She happily accepts and says that she will head there immediately. The librarian thanks her, surprised by how quickly Olivia accepted the request. She wasn't given a task, she was given a gift. Sending this woman to organize a library is basically the equivalent of giving her paid vacation. Before Olivia can dash off, Aster asks for her broom so that he can continue the work in her place. Olivia's response comes out loud and almost incredulous as she tells him that he just saved her. With complete confidence and leaving both young men speechless, Olivia bids them farewell and heads off to her first volunteer assignment. Aster watches her silhouette disappear into the distance, the broom resting on her shoulder. First unintentionally, he lets out a sincere observation. Somehow, seeing her makes him feel as though everything is going to work out. Standing beside him, Orit is also watching Olivia. With a faint smile, he quietly agrees that he thinks everything will work out as well. If Aster and Orit were left staring at her disappearing silhouette, enchanted by all the surprises she keeps bringing,